Let's shift gears a little bit here, shall we?
What's trending today?
I want to shift gears to another issue regarding some money, but it's an ongoing battle that we've seen for years, and it's finally starting to happen, which is a very concerning issue, as the bail bond industry. And we don't talk much about it on the radio program, but I think we need to talk about it more so than what we have with the bail bond industry. And as you know, the massive attack nationwide, largely funded by George Soros and his, or now Alex Soros and his organizations, going after bond, saying that it's racist or at least discriminatory to try and have someone pay for a bail bond to get out of jail. And instead, the courts just need to say, well, okay, you committed a murder or whatever. Let's just throw something out there and not a big deal. We'll go ahead and just let you out by the court's decision, not by actually making bail, as they've gone after now Illinois being one of the first states to go after the cash bail and trying to ban that one. To talk about some of that and more, excited to have back on the program. It's been a long time since we've had him on, way too long, from the American Bail Coalition. It's Jeff Clayton on the line with us here. Jeff, how are you, my friend?
I'm great. Sorry to follow a communist holiday.
Well, yeah, it is unfortunate, right? I mean, I enjoy a day off to be able to barbecue, but it's a little frustrating when we really look at the history of what Labor Day is all about. Kind of ridiculous. But the communist movement's not getting any better, because now they've been coming after your guys' industry, is the bail bond industry, for a long time. But this is actually starting to happen now.
Absolutely. And, it's all about, I can't afford my bail, so it doesn't matter. I shouldn't have to go to jail. And that's the communist world that we're going to be living in here soon.
Wow. What's going on in Illinois? Because they've passed this now, haven't they?
Yeah, I was just reading up on this morning, and basically what has occurred over the last several years is they decided to become the first state to eliminate money bail, but then put it off for 3 years. The prosecutors challenged it as unconstitutional, saying, you can't get rid of bail unless you ban it in the Constitution, which we've seen in a couple of other states that have done that. You have to do that. Well, the Illinois Supreme Court said, no problem. We'll just get rid of money bail. The legislature can do that. And that's where we stand. So we just found out this morning the first act of the Illinois Supreme Court is to deny due process because they can't comply with the law by having court hearings. We're going to do them all virtually. So now, if you're going to stay in jail in Illinois, you're going to have the, victims testifying by Microsoft Teams and the prosecutor on Zoom, and you'll be in your jumpsuit in jail trying to argue for bail now under the new system.
Wow. So what is the alternative? What's going to happen here if you don't post bail, call a bail bondsman, post bail to be able to walk out of jail after you commit a crime? What is the alternative process here?
It's called a system of preventative detention based on risk. And what does it mean? It means we have a tiebreaker. We say you can go to jail and you stay there the whole time. You don't get any chance of getting out, or you don't, and you get out of jail for free. Now, how do we decide that? Well, in Illinois, the legislature has made a list of crimes, and I'll get into the crimes that are not on the list, which is pretty absurd, but the list is very narrow. So the amount of people that are going to be staying in jail now based on this new procedure is going to be a lot less than under the old procedure, which is you afford your bail or you don't, and if you don't, you stay in jail.
Man, and we just talked about the student loan payments, where if you can't afford the payment, we're just going to go ahead and freeze your interest to where you can make whatever payment you can. But if you can't afford it, then by golly, why aren't you paying it? And we're going to come after you for every month that you actually don't pay it. And we're going to accrue the interest at a ridiculous amount, thanks to the Federal Reserve raising the prime interest rates, so on and so forth. So it's that social experiment, that socialist movement of pay it if you can, don't pay it if you can't. That's totally okay. We'll take care of you. They're applying the same thing now to the bail bond industry.
That's right. And the problem there is that it's incentives. That's what bail is supposed to do. It's supposed to be a third party putting up for you a financial guarantee to make sure that you show up in court. And if we say, well, we don't need that and you can't afford it and we don't need a financial guarantee, well, then there's no incentive to do anything. And that's what's going to happen in Illinois. If there's no bail, nobody's going to show up. All the people that walk for free, well, that's one problem. They're going to walk for free and they're not going to show up for court. And the other problem is that half the people that should be in jail won't be.
What it almost sounds like is that we're going to see like the courts that are backed up with the immigration office with illegal immigrants coming in, where, all right, your date's set for like 6 years from now, they never show up, and then they spend their entire life here while we're continuously playing backup, trying to track people down from a court date they missed 3 years ago, and we don't have the resources to actually go and do this. Are they trying to just put more criminals back on the streets? Because that's what it sounds like right now.
Well, you have a Democratic legislature saying we think money's unfair and we should have an individualized, full-blown due process hearing within 48 hours, except we're not going to give anybody any money to do anything. We're not going to give prosecutors the money to make the motions and have the hearings. We're not going to give the defenders any money to defend them. And we're not going to give any judges any more money to have any more judges to hear them. So what do you think is going to happen? Exactly what has happened, which is they're just throwing their hands up and saying, well, I guess we'll keep in as many people in jail as we can have hearings on. And that's it.
That's insane. We're talking with Jeff Clayton with the American Bail Coalition, with the Bail Project. Talk about, first off, the Bail Project. What is the Bail Project?
Yep, so this is another case that happened in Indiana. The Bail Project was bailing people out to prove that we don't need money bail. See, because they'll show up anyway if we post their bail using George Soros and other charitable money that they got through the Kamala Harris fundraising effort a couple of summers ago. They got $100 million. So they're going to bail people out, destabilize the system. Well, unfortunately, they bailed out some folks that they should not have bailed out who went on to commit serious crimes, not just in Indiana, but elsewhere. And so the Indiana legislature had enough and decided we're going to regulate them. We're going to say you can't just operate unregulated. And, of course, they challenged that case in federal court, and we can talk about the result there.
Yeah, let's talk about it. I mean, I love these programs because every time they say, oh, it's going to work, these social experiments, they come back and backfire big time on them. So what was the end result by this?
Well, you'll love this one. The Bail Project said that posting bail is protected First Amendment speech, and thus the government cannot regulate us. Now, every private industry in the United States would love to make that argument and not have to deal with regulators, and we certainly would. But we knew that one was going to fall on deaf ears, and it certainly did. But the second argument was that you were discriminating. You were forcing the Bail Project to have to do something that nobody else had to do. Well, the reality is that the bail industry is regulated by state and the federal governments. And so we face, extensive regulation, probably more so than we would want. And so it wasn't unfair. And the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals said, no, legislatures are on firm ground to regulate people who are going out and trying to destabilize the bail system. And anybody that's really posting bail in the criminal justice system is subject to state regulation.
Wow. I love how they can complicate this stuff more than what it actually needs to be. So if they have a choice to where you can get out or you can stay in jail and just run out your time, aren't we going to see a massive increase in people actually staying in jail, which is going to cost the taxpayers more? Or is it going to be a mandatory, okay, you've qualified based on the certain crime that you committed, so now you're not going to, and we're actually going to force you to not stay in jail, and you're just going to walk out and just go back to your own business?
Well, I would predict that the jail populations are going to be the same, but what's going to happen is more people are going to get out that shouldn't get out, and the people that stay in are going to stay in longer. And the net result will be we have the same number of jail bed days, but the problem is, like we saw at the federal system when we went to this model, the time to trial increased from 60 days to 365 days. And you can already get a flavor of that in Illinois, right? We can't even handle the hearings to decide if you should stay in jail, much less determine if you're guilty or innocent. So it's going to backlog the system and cause major problems.
Yeah. Well, and we're just trying to get caught up from the backlog we saw during COVID, aren't we? I mean, are we back to normal in the court system in general after the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, we should be. I mean, that was just the latest excuse we heard, like from the Houston court, saying first it was the hurricane and then it was the pandemic. And last I checked, during the pandemic, there was nothing else to do but work. So I don't know what the backlog was all about.
Yeah. Well, I know they had problems with social distancing and the amount of people that could be in a certain room. So at least here in Kansas, where our flagship is, I know we had some major backlogs with a lot of court cases because they couldn't put juries in there. They couldn't actually do any cases, and it was a disaster. I think they're close to being caught up now, but golly, it's just going to complicate things even more. We're talking with Jeff Clayton, the American Bail Coalition. Jeff, can you stick over one more segment with us?
Absolutely.
Awesome. I want to continue this conversation about what's going on in Illinois, Indiana, how they made theirs, and some of these other states. What states are on the docket right now as they continue to attack this bail bond industry, the cash bail that individuals get to enjoy? Because, we can walk out if we post the bail, the investment of a third-party private entity ensuring that they can get out of jail as long as they show up to court. That begs the question, if you're trying to get rid of that, do you really want the people to go back into court and actually get their punishment, or are they completely rehabilitated by the slap on the wrist and say, don't do that again? And you can see how well the crime rates are going across the nation as well. We'll do some of that when we come back right around the corner for a Tuesday on The Voice of Reason. Stay here. We're hanging out with Jeff Clayton with the American Bail Association, or the American Bail Coalition, as we talk about the bond industry, cash bail being attacked on all fronts. Illinois already starting to get rid of it. Indiana having some issues. Jeff, how many states right now actually have legislation or are actively working on trying to rid themselves of cash bail?
Well, it's quite a few still. I think we're going to probably expect 5 major fights next year. I think several states are looking at constitutional changes. Those include Delaware and Connecticut. There's been some conversations in Michigan, Minnesota, always conversations in California. which has the highest bail rates in the country, if you can believe it. And I think we're going to continue to see attacks on the criminal justice system and the bail system going forward.
Yeah, I know you said that the legislature passed it in Illinois. It was approved by the Supreme Court because that's just how progressive they are, unfortunately, in that state. But where does the Attorney General fall into this? Because you would think that the head legal person for the state, with being the Attorney General and that side of things, would have a say in this as well. Is that why we're seeing an investment from the Soros family into certain attorney general races around the country? And is that having an impact on it as well?
Well, it's hard to say. In this case, I think, I can't really blame this particular attorney general because I think he did what he was supposed to do, which is defend the craziness that the legislature passed. And, whether he could have taken a walk on it and just had somebody else defend it, I don't know. But I do think there are attorneys general that are pushing progressive criminal justice reforms in Minnesota and elsewhere that we've seen that are problematic. And I think you are seeing a push at the legal, judicial level to reform things when the legislature can't seem to get it where the activists want it to go, that will go through the back door and have the judges or have the attorney general issue an opinion saying that we have to do something or that something's unconstitutional that we previously thought was constitutional.
Yeah. Let's go down to the local level for a second here in the last few minutes that we have. And this is pure, I guess, speculation, except for maybe the social experiment that we've already seen with the failure with the bail project already. But let's talk about law enforcement and their role in this, because already we hear from law enforcement across the nation, especially in many rural communities. I'm coming from Kansas, and a lot of our state patrol and county sheriffs and city police. Let's say someone gets pulled over for a DUI, and you know what? Sometimes if it's on a dirt road in the middle of the night, it's like, do I really take these people in for a DUI, fill out all this ridiculous paperwork, take myself off the streets for this long for something to probably never happen because of connections, because of money, because of whatever. So I'm not going to enforce it the way I probably should be enforcing something like this. If we have criminals, Chicago, for example, since Illinois is passing this, criminals that have drugs, that have guns, that have issues, they go into jail, they turn around, walk right back out because of the system and the way they set this up. What's the incentive for law enforcement to actually go out and arrest these individuals, to process the paperwork, to put them in jail, to quote unquote get them off the street if they're back out in less than a couple hours?
Well, you've hit the nail on the head, which is criminal justice reforms over the last 15 years have stood for the proposition that recidivists, those who do it over and over again, we're going to be easier on in the name of protecting the poor. And therein lies the problem. I mean, right? We do have sympathy for the first timers, but when repeat criminals aren't punished and get out, it sends a signal to law enforcement that there's no reason to enforce the law, and it sends a signal to the public that there's no reason to follow it. And that's the problem. That's where we are right now, right? Everybody knows that we can't put every person who shoplifts in prison for 20 years, but if we put one in for 20 years who does it a bunch, we send the signal to everybody else not to do that. And that's why things have broken down. So that's what it comes down to, is we need to change the message at the local level to, if you do repeat crimes, the system's going to get you. And that's ultimately the way to get on top of this crime wave. Yeah.
Is law enforcement coming out against these policies?
Generally not. I mean, from what I've heard from sheriffs around the country and law enforcement in urban areas who are generally silenced because chiefs of police aren't elected. But the law enforcement that I've heard of, they want to crack down on recidivists. They think people should have to secure their release to get out of jail, and they don't think get out of jail free cards work. Yeah.
Amen to that. It's Jeff Clayton, the American Bail Coalition. It is an important issue, and it's something, as we continue to see crime rates rise all across the nation, we have to pay attention to this. This is one of the few measures that's actually in place that was working and working efficiently to keep really bad people behind bars and be able to let some of those first-timers out, like you said, and making sure we actually show up to court, we get punished the way we're supposed to, let the legal system play out. But apparently, that's racist, man. Not allowed to do that. Jeff, we appreciate the time very much, my friend. Keep up the fight on this. Let's get you back on and do another update here soon.
You got it. It was great being on.
Hey, absolutely. Always a pleasure. We'll do it again here soon. Until then, podcast up in just a little bit. We're back at it throughout this week, and we have a